Well, hello, and welcome to Reanimated. This is a podcast about zombies and undead things. Currently, we're talking about a bunch of vampires because we've been looking at Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. My name is Stuart. I'm one of your hosts, and joining me from New York is H.A. Conrad. Hello, H.A. How's it going?
Hello and Happy New Year. Happy 2023.
My gosh. Yeah, that's a weird number for a year. It keeps tripping me up. But here we are in 2023. But hi, we're here to talk about the last episode of the first season of Interview with the Vampire, which was renewed. And what an episode it was. What a cliffhangery kind of ending. And but before we get to that, we have some news, a little bit scraps here and there. First of which, HA, do you want to go into it?
Oh, sure. So Netflix did like a listicle of or a tally of their most watched series, and All of Us Are Dead was the fifth most watched in 2022, which, for a horror series is pretty significant and also a foreign horror series. So I was really impressed with this and I was really happy for them. And I think we talked about it before, but if we didn't, the show did get renewed for a second season, so I think we'll be seeing more of this. And hats off to the creators of this show. I think they did a really amazing job with this.
Yeah, impressive was that the show actually beat out Extraordinary Attorney Woo, Inventing Anna, The Watcher, Sandman, and Virgin River. Everything should beat Virgin River. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but
I have not, but
it's just a dumpster fire.
mm,
I mean, I couldn't even get through the first episode. It was just too saccharine. However, All of Us Are Dead totally beat the pants off of it. And it came in just under Bridgerton, which is kind of insane.
yeah, that's crazy. So well done, and I can't wait to see the next season of this. I think there's a lot to explore here. So I think that'll be pretty cool. So,
Yeah, they clearly had thought about a second season or at least an
oh yeah,
expansion of the story. So
yep.
it won't be difficult. I also sadly reported to HA earlier when we were talking before we started recording that part of my search almost always goes to, hey, I wonder what's going on with Black Summer season 3.
Yep.
And it
And
feels like the things I've been seeing over the last few months are like, oh, it's been ghost canceled. It's basically, yeah, they're like Netflix is ghosting it. Like they're
yep,
not saying it's canceled, they're not renewing it.
but they're just not saying anything. So that's
Apparently
not
they've
good.
changed the way they've done the top 10 so that Black Summer season 2 looked like it did not do as well,
Hmm.
which has some people saying, well, that probably means it's not going to get renewed. Jamie King, the lead actor, and apparently I don't know if she's a producer, but she's very um, interested and opinionated about the show and its continuation, has said she has ideas for a season 3,
Hmm.
but that it would probably be a final season. I'd be fine with that. Let's finish up the story. Where's Sun
Yeah,
going on that plane?
yeah.
Like,
I want to
can
know what
Jamie
happens
ever
to the
walk
sun.
again?
Yep. I wanna see the end of this. So,
Yeah, I don't know. It
but
was such a good show. I think it deserves more than the 2 seasons that it got.
I agree, but maybe everybody was just so exhausted after doing all those runarounds and stunts and things like that that they just can't bring themselves to bring out the energy to do a third season. It's
Maybe
possible.
maybe that's all
But
it is. Um, Speaking of people with a track record of doing a lot of insane things, we
mm,
also have an article here about Tom Savini's top 11 effects. Unsurprisingly, something like 6 of them on this list are from George Romero projects. Like,
yeah, yeah, and a
uh,
lot. There's at least three from Day of the Dead, and so I think he made his bones doing all these things. And one of the things about Tom Savini that I think is, um, and he talks about it too. Just George Romero allowed him an enormous amount of freedom to do a lot of the things that he wanted to do. And I think even with they weren't always, especially early on, they weren't working with the most like expansive budgets. So not only was he doing these things, but he was doing these things on a shoestring a lot of the time, so had to be creative. And there is a campiness to some of the effects, and that is true. But he definitely made his mark in terms of, I think, leaving these very specific kind of visions, like terrified visions for everybody to see. So this was kind of a fun list to look through.
yeah, it had some like specific call outs to three specific deaths in Day of the Dead, which I thought were quite good. I barely even remembered the shovel decapitation one, but
Mm,
it's a list that was written with some attention to detail, which I do appreciate.
yep.
We've
Um,
got a little bit. We don't tend to do. I mean, usually when we're recapping or talking about an episode, we will speculate about what's coming next. We tend not to do that between seasons or spin-offs in this case. But there was an article from Screen Rant this week speculating about how Daryl Dixon is going to get to France. If in the end of the last episode of the Prime show, Maggie sort of gives him verbally, I guess, this mission so that he'll ride off into those oversaturated lavender fields at the end
mhm.
to go and find out what's going on with these darn tootin' smart zombies that are climbing the walls.
I don't know,
So,
Stuart. I think he's just going to ride his bike across the ocean, don't
may-
you?
yeah, maybe he'll just mod it and put some skis on there and
Great.
make it a ski do.
It's going to be
Uh,
perfect.
yeah, I hope that they don't just kind of hand wave the ocean crossing. I feel like that's got to be significant
To me,
on
that would be a really cool piece, right? The getting across the ocean in this world.
yeah.
Although they've used enough, I mean, what I suspect is that, I mean, this is, I don't want to say it's cheating, whatever, but they've used enough like helicopters and things that require a lot of fuel that I
Hmm.
could see it being like some kind of a secret plane scenario, right? Where
So
he has,
having flown in an aircraft that could not get across the Atlantic in one hop, I'm still going to go ahead and say it would be really challenging.
yes, it would,
Uh, yeah,
but
and
that's the
that
part.
was a C-130 that needed to stop either in Iceland or the Azores, like that, or get aerial refueled. That's not a small aircraft. Like this is a big plane, and it just did not have the legs. And landing in those two places is not easy.
I'm just saying that that's what I think they're gonna hope that people don't realize that, and
Yeah, they
maybe
probably. Yeah,
that's
you're
how
right.
they're gonna do it.
I'm being too
Because
realistic.
in ocean crossing, I don't know. It just seems like they wouldn't. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and that. But I feel like they're gonna get more into the action if they do end up over there. And some of the speculation. And by the way, we're just sitting here tooling around talking about this because there really isn't that much in this article, so I don't want to be
Well,
leading
the
anybody.
yeah,
There's nothing here that we haven't already kind of thought about or heard about at this point. But
yeah.
basically, you know, they've laid a few breadcrumbs out there about like the French scientific team, the fast zombies, all that jazz. So, I mean, I feel like he is going to end up over there in like early on, and they're going to try to. I don't know that they're going to spend a ton of time doing the lead in, maybe like a few episodes, but it feels like most of the action would probably take place in Paris
Depends how long
or
the
in
season
France.
is
Yeah.
too. 16 episodes was it 16 was the standard for the Prime show. The
Right.
spin-offs have not been as consistent with that. I don't remember how long the World Beyond ones were, maybe 10.
Mm,
The anthology show was what, 6?
yeah.
So we'll see how much they feel like spending on Daryl Dixon. I think
Yeah,
it's
I
going to
just
take him one episode at least to figure out that he needs to go
yeah.
to France and maybe start going to France.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I just
he'll,
think
yeah,
they're
they'll
gonna
pay enough
just want to
attention
get
to
him
make it.
there. They're gonna want to get him there as quickly as possible because the whole thing is to get him in a different place.
Yeah, and all of
And
the promotional art, the photos have been, it looks like European. Like there isn't a lot of attention being paid to, oh, I've got to go to Ohio to find Team Primrose,
right,
who were name dropped at the end in the after credits scene of The World Beyond.
right. So TBD, but looking forward to seeing that.
Do we have
In
a estimated time that that show is going to air?
they gave sort of at the end of the season, the big finale, they gave that whole trailer and it gave kind of estimates. So I but I don't recall when this one is. So hang on, let me look it up.
Yeah, I'm not
You
seeing a
can
date when I
edit.
first Googled it, but it's one of 4 spinoffs.
They say 2023 likely the second half of the year. So
Yeah,
they're being
because Dead
pretty
City's coming
specific.
in April is what I'm seeing. So
Yeah.
that'll precede it. And then Daryl Dixon and Rick and Michonne at the end of the year. And
Yeah.
Fear the Walking Dead, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I guess we'll have to wait and find out. Mm,
And to talk about a show or a movie rather that we're not excited about, or at least based upon this trailer, doesn't seem all that exciting. There was a Korean zombie film that was released in 2023. Uh,
2022 in South Korea,
sorry,
but
2022, but in 2023 they're going to release it in the US, I guess. And it's called Gangnam Zombie. At least with this trailer, there doesn't seem to be a lot of anything with it, just a lot of kicking heads and teeth and things like that. I don't know what you think, Stuart. Maybe we'll check it out. Maybe there's a better trailer of it to get a better sense of this, but at least based upon this does not look too exciting to me.
no, the trailer really focuses only on like one or two sets, which
Hmm.
makes the film feel or maybe they're only really focusing on a couple of scenes early on in the film, but I think you do want to show that this movie is going to take place in a few different locations. But that like very white building that they're in for almost the whole trailer is just like,
Yeah.
oh, well, there's not a whole lot to look at here. So that to me was the main detractor, and the fact that it was a bunch of like pithy one-liners
Yeah, and then
that
the other
weren't that
part is
good.
the other part is that I heard nothing about this until this little thing started coming out. So my guess is that they've been looking to shop it around and hoping to get a US release and they got it. So
Yeah.
maybe they weren't quite prepped for it with the trailer, but so maybe we'll give it another chance if we see a better sort of synopsis. But that is coming out. I'm sure there will be others. It's been actually again a bit of dry news cycle over the holidays, but hopefully more stuff will come back. And actually, that's usually what happens because in January a ton of stuff gets released, typically straight to streaming services.
Mm-hmm.
So I bet there will be more of these kinds of projects that we might see new things happening. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah. I'm googling right now. Army of the Dead. That sequel or the animated version needs to be coming somewhat
Soon.
soonish.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll hear some more about that early
Yeah.
in 2023 also. But
But
moving on, should we Anne Rice it up in here?
we should Anne Rice it up.
Speaking of
And
Anne Ricing it and the Immortal Universe, which is their like series overarching umbrella name, the
mhm,
Mayfair Witches, I believe, airs this week or next.
I think so. I was actually going to mention that to you and see what you thought about it. So maybe we should. I'm not ready to commit to reviewing that yet. Because
You're
I
not ready
don't.
for to talk about ghost dildos or random
Uh,
stuff. That's
yeah.
yeah. I
Well,
don't know.
let's
I
see.
think let's have a look at it.
Let's see how it goes. But yeah. Anyway, um, but in the meantime, we're going to chat about the final episode of season one of Interview with a Vampire, and it was renewed. So I believe.
Yes, we talked about that last
So
week.
so and I have some thoughts about this, but anyway, I think let's jump into it.
Totally. So this episode is called "The Thing Lay Still," um, and it's basically just the telling of how they killed Lestat, and it starts with is it Malloy asking Louis the question, "Can the immortal meet mortality?" And then Louis, I believe, doesn't Louis like rattle off a list of ways?
Yep.
Starvation, drink the blood of the dead, fire, decapitation are the four that I captured. I don't know if there were any others that you heard.
Nope, that's pretty much it.
I find starvation. I
But
don't know
that's
that I've ever heard of a vampire dying of starvation in that universe.
no, and they don't die, they just become kind of dormant.
Yeah.
So that's like the whole thing is that sometimes they go to ground and they just kind of chill out for a while and they like hang out in the dirt. So that was kind of weird that he said that. Um, but I think there was also there was something in that universe like a punishment would be to like trap one and so that they would go kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. Wouldn't they put him in like an Iron Maiden or something along
Yeah,
those lines? Yeah.
yeah. That kind of a thing. But anyway, um there this is the episode where, you know, Claudia's been plotting and she wants to kill Lestat, and so this is just the sort of how this all plays out.
Yeah, and they set the
And
stage here pretty well with
Mhm.
just showing how badly things are going for Louis and Claudia again. Lestat, despite everything that happened, in the last episode with him feeling, or 2 episodes ago, with him like pleading for them to come back, or Louis really to come back, they have to all sleep in the same room. They all have to go hunting together. It feels like there's very little agency for Louis, let alone Claudia.
right. And there's obviously the tension and fear and manipulation there because of the way Lestat brought Claudia back. And I will say, even in this, it was sort of sticking with me. Like, it doesn't, I don't know that they stuck the landing on this in terms of why he wants Claudia there. Again, ostensibly, it's because he knows Louis is suffering and is in a bad way and wants her there to keep Louis happy, and he doesn't know how to. But I don't know. It doesn't totally, to me, it doesn't totally wash or connect in that way. But that's sort of where they are. And so um
Yeah, we kind of open with this scene of Lestat is draining out an encyclopedia salesman on their
yeah,
dining room table. I
yeah,
feel like Lestat is making some weird choices and being very not risk averse, whatever the opposite of that is, risky. He's exhibiting
yeah,
risky behavior because not only
he
do they
is.
kill this encyclopedia salesman who's probably knocked on a bunch of doors on the street, and maybe they just figure door to door salesman, nobody misses them, but I can't think that that's true. Then they kill
Right.
the next guy who comes to their door, like without
Right.
without really an issue. I mean, they kind of set it up like they are treating people who come to their door as if it's a conspiracy to reveal them or unveil them, right?
Right. And yet they are just killing them, which doesn't make any sense, right?
And that doesn't fly with what Lestat was saying to Claudia several episodes ago. It's like you don't kill in our neighborhood, like you have to go further afield.
Right.
And this guy even says, "I'm your neighbor. I think you
Yeah.
guys are awesome. Please tell me the secret to everlasting life."
Because, and he's turns out he's dying and he's weirdly religious and strange and all sorts of things. Um and then they do make a point because Lestat says he's got cancer of the blood or whatever it was, so that like he can certainly taste things like about victims, and there's so they make that a point again in this, which
Oh, I'm glad you heard that because I did not hear what that line was. I saw him spit
yeah,
it out, and I'm like, "What did he say? Something can't just say can't something the blood." So, nice. Yeah, I was wondering why he had spit out the blood, but that makes
right,
sense. I kind of thought that this was going to poison him, but no, he's too wily for that.
yep,
Uh, Claudia then tells Louis that he's going to have to give himself over to Lestat entirely. This is kind of where they set up the fact that she's the ringmaster here. She has seen 5 moves ahead, like she said she was going to when they were playing chess in the last episode. So she's going to keep Louis in the dark, and he's going to trust her and try not to fall too deeply in love with Lestat, but that doesn't seem to be something he can do.
yep,
Um, I thought that was an interesting scene. There, I think that was when they're all in the streetcar,
mm-hmm.
and apparently Antoinette is on that streetcar too. I didn't go back to watch to see if I could see her, but there she was in the showrunner after show segment. I don't know if you've been watching those.
No, not really.
But it's still, yeah, it's not as, for some reason, it's not as good as Angela Kang
Well,
ones with The
they
Walking
kind
Dead.
of like the after I watched the first couple, and then it didn't to me. I'll admit to you, I kind of want an Angela Kang insight into things, and that's
Yeah,
not what they usually do.
yeah.
Um, so I did what actually I did watch this one. So and I was disappointed.
There
Um,
is there is a line shortly after the streetcar scene. I My notes just say so he was talking about Greece. I forget why they were talking about Greece. Do you remember why?
Oh, I don't remember, but then he goes and he throws in a line, and this was honestly one of the most ham-handed things to do, but he throws in that the those that must be kept are there or something like that,
But
which I
they're
was
in
like, oh,
Egypt, right? Aren't they in Egypt in the
yeah,
books?
no, no, I don't think they're kept in Egypt. They were taken from Egypt.
Oh, okay.
That's where they were originally, but yes, I the keeper of them keeps them in Greece, I think, or
Okay,
something
so
like
is
that.
that
I
that
don't know
might
if
be
it's Greece
canonical?
precisely. I don't think it may not be Greece. It may be in the Mediterranean somewhere. I don't recall. But anyway, um,
I mean, I still perked up and thought it was cool, but I agree it is a little ham-fisted that he's just like, oh, and those who must be kept. Never mind, moving
mhm.
on. He is always keeping information back, right? But I forget why they were talking about Greece.
um,
Maybe it doesn't matter. Is it
it might
because
have
they're
been,
planning their trip overseas?
yeah, maybe they were talking about going there.
They're trying to, but of course, Lestat only wants to go to Argentina,
Right.
which, yeah, maybe that would be a good place to go.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you can probably get to it a little bit more easily. But anyway, they they are plotting this whole elaborate thing. Part of this makes sort of sense. Again, some of it doesn't. I guess this is their elaborate plot to sort of have Lestat go out. Both, they make it like they're going to go out in a blaze of glory, but again, it's sort of against every single instinct or lesson that they've been taught at this point. Number one, don't get involved in the human affairs and things like that. And
Yeah, they
so,
go so buck
and
wild. Lestat is like,
yeah,
and he's just drinking it up.
and they kind of float this idea out, and it just seems to be like to me a little bit, just given everything that we've learned, not necessarily something that makes sense, especially given how much sort of interest and attention they're getting. And, like, yes, this world is a little bit different than the one obviously we live in now, where hopefully they could disappear. But maybe this is the point, is that they feel all powerful, and like this isn't that big of a deal. But it does seem to me like it's not just human attention they're trying to avoid. I mean, we've now heard about, the terrible vampire that Claudia ran into. We know that they can hear their thoughts. And then at the end of this, we see that that's true, but in a specific way. And it seems to me like doing something this crazy would draw a lot of attention that they don't want. But that doesn't seem to matter to them at the time. And
Yeah,
so,
maybe because they're just gonna beat feet afterwards, and they're just like, yeah, don't worry about it. But
yeah,
they've made such a name for themselves already. That's why like this party works in a way, is because they know that there are so many people who want to know their secret.
right.
Because when they
Um,
go to, well, first they go to the movies, and they do something else that's kind of high profile. They're talking over the newsreel, where in the newsreel they're saying, National Socialism has been what's happening in Germany for like 5 years. So that puts them, I think, at 1944 ish, give or take.
yep.
Uh, so and then the guy keeps shushing them, and Lestat finally just makes him punch himself for, I don't know,
Yeah.
hours, a while, which is another power. I mean, we knew he could hypnotize, but he does that so effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of creepy. And then they go to Anderson's office. I don't know if he's a congressman now. He's still got a fancy office. He has aged. They haven't spoken in 17 years,
Mm-hmm.
he says, and he's no longer even like pretending to be friendly with them at this point. He's just kind of like, tell me what you've got, um, and I'm not going to help you. Um, I mean, they haven't talked in 17 years. I guess that's fine. He can be that way. And it turns out that he's making coffins and shipping them to Europe. So he's in a pretty sleazy business,
True,
considering how many
but
people are
but
dying in Europe.
they win him over by their money and influence, as always. So
Yeah.
his very weak protests don't last long. And then there is I mean, his commentary and his comments are such that that things are not probably going to go well for him. Um, Mainly because he's marked, and he even talks out loud about the fact that they haven't aged and that there's something very wrong with them. And but yet he's like, okay, that's fine. And I mean, even what they're asking him to do, which is like they want to be in the sort of spotlight on the Mardi Gras parade float, and they want
1
Lestat.
month before the parade
Yeah.
begins.
And
Yeah.
they want Lestat to be the Raj, which is like the king of the parade and all this other stuff. And, he's like, oh, it's impossible. And then they give him like what they're going to do. He's like, okay, maybe it's possible. And so,
They give him a boat.
yep, yep.
And I guess that's enough. Which kind of raises the question of whether or not they couldn't have been doing that this whole time. When every
Right.
time, we talked about this before, it was mostly bit that Lestat had no interest in helping Louis
Right.
out with his business ventures. So when he got frozen out, they could have reversed this. They could have single-handedly made New Orleans like a integrated city,
Mhm.
um, and undone Jim Crow and all of this stuff. But no, that wasn't Lestat's interest.
Well, and I mean, I think that part of the point of all of this is that if they get Lestat sort of to buy into this pageantry idea, which he loves,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly he'll just go full throttle. And that's essentially what they've done. And they've done it so successfully that I think in a sense, Louis is buying in because he is falling in love with Lestat again per Claudia's instructions, because he can't lie and he has a very hard time doing that. So it is a weird like tension there, because while they are plotting his downfall, I would also say that it's true that they are very much enjoying this sort of subterfuge with the population, that they're enjoying this little vignette that they're creating to go out in such a blaze of glory.
Yeah.
So, and Claudia and Lestat are very much alike. So they are very much enjoying toying with these humans, toying with this crazy, the fact that they could do this thing with the Mardi Gras parade, they are absolutely, um, it like reveling in it. And so this is, I think, just such an interesting way. When they go out big, I
They
suppose.
did go out
So,
big. One other risky piece of risky behavior they do before even they get this far, when they're even having the idea about the Mardi Gras parade, they're all
mhm.
standing on the balcony of their townhouse in like I don't know if they're in the French Quarter or where they are, but uh, and they see a drunk woman walking down the street, and Claudia just jumps off the balcony and lands in the street.
Yep,
There are people everywhere. Like they are just they don't even care. She
yep.
jumps down like 20 feet and just starts walking.
And it's not very dark.
No, it's very
Um,
bright with like lights everywhere, and yeah, it's crazy. Um, flashing forward again, Malloy has also seen Rashid taking a phone call in direct sunlight, and he's giving Rashid. This episode is full of him giving Rashid like second glances, which is since his dream or remembered dream memory thing that he had at the end of the last episode. He's like, so he's watching Rashid take a phone call in the sunlight in
right.
Dubai, and he's like, oh, okay. But he still doesn't. It doesn't look like he's convinced. Um, Claudia is going to a pharmacy and just saying, "I want laudanum and arsenic," and she's getting it from the pharmacist. Maybe it's easier to get it when you look like you're 14.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Uh, but yeah,
But
like I want opium and rat poison.
yeah,
Just
no
can you
kidding.
imagine?
And just a
Uh,
kid walking in to get it and
Try that at
um
CVS next time.
yeah. Um and again, I mean the things this whole scene, and I feel like they go all out in terms of like, and this was the thing about the Anne Rice books that I think they have captured so well, is just how beautiful New Orleans is.
Mm.
And they've really captured sort of the raucousness of Mardi Gras here, and the um it's a really, this is a beautiful episode, the way they shoot it, as dark as it is. All the New Orleans scenes are really just incredible. And then the party scenes themselves, like I just think it keeps going, sort of taking this up another notch in terms of how ridiculous they are going to get, and like how open they are. But I
Hmm.
even
Yeah,
like,
they even go too far, but it's not because of vampirism, right?
right, it's like wow.
Although the fake baby on
Yeah,
the float was very
yes,
insane.
yeah,
And that's just like without any fanfare. They're just like, and here we are at the judge's balcony, and I'm gonna eat a baby, says Lestat, and like blood streamers go everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they hold up this fake baby like it's a giant joke, and I was like,
Yep.
wow, I don't know, man, that's pretty insane by
Yeah.
any standard.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously certain people are really disgusted by it, and you see the people from the committee kind of like going, oh my gosh, and turning away and being like, what have we done? So
But a
they're
few of them still show up at the after
but they
party.
still show up because I
Well,
think
not the
that
after party. It's well, I guess there's like two after parties, right? There's the
yeah.
after
Yep.
party and then the after
And the
party.
after party, right. So and basically their whole plot is to have this big huge party, and then they have a specific number of people that they're going to target, basically anybody who they think might be interested in eternal life, and they're going to play with them basically. And so they're kind of marking their victims basically through this process. And really, I mean, this is just completely toying with the humans, basically just bring them into their lair to have this one big last crazy thing, and then crazy feast, as they put it. And then the other idea that they had was that they didn't eat for a few days before this, so they're all really starving. And um, that is actually a huge piece of this, is because the judgment of all of them, I would say, is kind of off, right?
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, I get that there was a lot of control by Lestat, but to prevent them from maybe getting out and eating so that they wouldn't lose so much of their judgment.
Right. But I
But
don't think
Luke,
I would have done that if I were them.
no, like find a way,
Right.
find a
Because there's
like, yeah.
eat some rats or something ahead of time with something. Um, but
But they go
you
like
know,
delirious. I mean, it's been. I think they said they were going to try and fast for 3 days.
yeah,
Maybe that's all it takes to like get kind of insane. Like they're just giddy
right,
and kind of crazy.
right.
Um, so at the party, you hear Antoinette's voice in the whispering gallery, but then Anderson shows up and also whispers to Louis.
Hmm.
Um, and for a split second, I was like, "Is he a vampire too?" But no. And
Yeah.
then he explains what's going on, and says some really nasty stuff. I think I forget, he has like, he calls him satanic pedophile something.
Yep.
Um, and then Louis like, "Would you like to come to the after party?"
And he's like, yeah,
Yeah, that guy needed to go. He was kind of a jerk.
yeah.
And
And
Claudia also introduces the twins, and the twins are from the books, but I think they were children in the books, weren't they? Like little
they
kids.
were, I don't know if they were little kids or teenagers or something. Um, but basically they bring their victims all to the after party, and they make up some ridiculous thing about them being like sorcerers, or Lestat's like a sorcerer or something like that. Um, and then, Lestat basically is like, I discovered the elixir of life. And they absolutely reveal how old each of like how old they are, and um, just then go to town. And this is like, but prior to this, is a very interesting scene, more so because of all the other stuff going on during this party. But apparently everybody's scandalized because Louis and Lestat are dancing together and making out. So,
Well, they
which,
kiss once, but I think that's that one kiss, and it's the dancing together that certainly
right.
has everybody looking at them, and then they have a kiss, and that is like, whoa, that kind of ends the party, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know that
Claudia slaps or bites Louis,
I
to
know.
be like, snap out of it. But
Right.
also, he's just doing what she told him to do, right?
Right. But I guess part of me is a little bit, I don't know, skeptical that this would cause such a huge uproar there in New Orleans. But
I don't know,
maybe
man.
I'm wrong, and
Nineteen
maybe in this particular part of society it would have caused this thing. But I don't know that it would have, only because they've been, I mean, it's not exactly like they've hidden um this specific aspect, but I guess, but they're trying to make a point that this was what scandalized people more so than them being vampires to some extent, or their everlasting life, or the fact that they don't age. But
Yeah.
then we then we jump right into the big scene, and it is, I mean, the effects here are great. The terror that the people feel, I mean, they really are predators,
Well,
just
I
kind of.
like the preamble that Lestat. I mean, it's kind of funny because he goes into this like story about buying a book that has the
Yeah.
secret, and then
Hmm.
all three of them introduce themselves again and say their
Yeah.
age. I think Claudia is like 30 something
Hmm.
or maybe more. Louis is 61. Lestat is 180. And I took of the waters in whatever year, and I thought that was a really cool way to and you elicit those gasps from the people who are like, oh, now we're gonna get in on this. The story, Lestat's story goes on too long, and Anderson is like, give me that, revealing the empty bowl. Um, and Lestat can't stop himself and just like dives over the table. But yeah, then there aren't that many of them. I feel like Louis doesn't eat anybody. Doesn't
Mm-mm.
feel like he does. Because Claudia gets a bunch of people, including the big guy. Oh, who got the chief of police? Was it Louis? I think that was Louis.
Yeah, I think that was Louis.
So it's not that many people, but I agree. It was fun. I like the mostly the costuming. I love the blood smears on Claudia's blouse or whatever she's wearing. They're all in
Mhm.
like their undergarments, so that I think so that they can just change into their good clothes and leave the house right afterwards.
Right, right.
Is kind of what they're doing. But I just thought that the makeup or the effects on their clothes looked really good because they were very consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Um,
the big reveal is that obviously Antoinette is not dead. She's there. She's a vampire. And Claudia is very taunting of Lestat, basically saying, you should have let my train go, and this is sort of what you're reaping. You're reaping what you sowed here. And he's like, there's like a double cross because, like, obviously both she and Louis were aware of Antoinette, and so,
I don't know that Louis was aware of Antoinette. Claudia was.
well,
Louis,
but
I think,
they,
has just been head over heels, like doing what he was told, falling back in love with Lestat, getting really into everything, but
well, I
also
mean,
in the back of his head, knowing that they were planning to kill him.
but they heard, they were outside the room with Lestat and
But she
Antoinette,
was not a
remember?
vampire in that scene.
Oh, what?
Her,
I thought she was though.
no,
Maybe not.
not yet.
But in any case, there's like a double cross. So first of all, Antoinette's there and taunting them by repeating all the things she's been listening in on in terms of the things that Claudia's been saying.
This is
And then
also a departure from the book because he doesn't drink the twins. That's
no,
drinking the twin is what kills him in the other
right.
versions of the story
Yeah.
that we're familiar with. In this one, they twist it because she has not only poisoned one of the twins, she has poisoned Anderson, and
Anderson, yeah.
that's what takes down Lestat. It was a little disappointing to me that Antoinette, who is more recently turned than Claudia, is so easily able to overpower
Right.
Claudia, but it doesn't last.
Right.
So I'm glad that it didn't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand the like physical power because she was a child when she was turned, maybe, but I feel like she should be
Well,
more powerful.
in the books, it's actually when however long it takes between, when you made your last, if they're following the canon, Lestat has made several people before he made Louis, which is why Louis is actually so weak, and Claudia shortly thereafter. So, um, I don't know what they're doing here, but I don't think enough time has passed for Antoine to be this strong. But maybe it's just because she's an adult versus a child vampire. But um,
Yeah,
in any case, this goes. It's pretty, despite all the terrible things, and I mean, I think this is just how manipulative, and they walk this line of tension pretty well. When they're taking out Lestat, it's pretty rough, because they're slitting his throat, like he's bleeding out. He's still Louis is clearly upset about it. um they're not upset about Antoinette, obviously.
no.
um and they take care of her pretty thoroughly, but they definitely don't take care of Lestat. So, I do think that that's interesting and a good point when,
Well, Malloy's giving him a really hard time
yeah,
about it in Dubai. Like, you just put him in a rug and then put him in a
mm,
trunk that went out to the dump. Uh,
yeah,
that I feel like, well, in the film with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, he ends up in the old house, I think. somehow. He like scuttles around like a crab inside the old house until I don't know, it was at some point in the 80s or 70s he like goes back outside Lestat. In this
That
case
well,
they're
in the books, they basically do all of this and then they dump him in the swamp.
in the swamp, right?
Yeah, and he comes back eating like fish and eels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in this case, Daniel Malloy is like, oh, there's rats at the dump, which I mean, this whole speech, it's like, yeah, of course, like, okay.
Yeah, it's a little
Um,
bit too Hercule Poirot for
yeah, totally,
the punch,
totally.
and he did it. And so as he's like yelling at Louis, also I thought the effects of Lestat being dead were pretty good. Like he looked pretty dead, didn't he?
He
With his
did.
eyes rolled up. They kind of just bug out and get in their get on their boat with the coffins heading to Europe. But as Malloy is yelling at Louis, uh, Louis keeps telling Rashid to be quiet. Rashid keeps trying to interject. And then in the
Mhm.
background, you see him start taking off his gloves and his contacts.
Yep.
And I was like, in my notes, I have it written here. It's like, is Rashid Lestat? He's floating. And maybe
Yep.
you're supposed to think that. I don't know. Did you have a moment of that?
Didn't think he was a stat, but I was like, who is he supposed to be? Because I'll admit, like, there was, but we'll talk about this, you know, um, in a minute. But there, he didn't match what I thought would be this particular vampire.
Well, just we're
Um,
there. I feel like there's not much else
all
to
right,
talk about.
so the big reveal is that he's the vampire Armand, who plays a huge a huge part in this series. Um, and they did this actually in the films as well because it was Antonio Banderas who plays Armand, and Armand is supposed to have like auburn hair. He's supposed to look like a Caravaggio painting. And I don't mind, I think it's fine that they cast him in this way. Um, which is a little different, and I feel like they're trying to blend two of the vampires because actually the vampire that makes him is like a Middle Eastern vampire, or like from the Middle East, I think. So maybe,
Marius makes
yeah,
Armand, who is,
yeah.
I think, a Roman.
Is he a Roman? Okay, so but in any case, like I didn't immediately think that this was Armand, no, but I wasn't sure who they were trying to kind of place in this role. I was like, are they taking a new twist? So when he reveals himself to be that, it was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense because he's a lot older. Um, and so and they're definitely setting up the second season because this is like a huge reveal. And I think they're blending a lot of the stories of the books a little earlier and in a different way than obviously um in this series than they did in the books. But I think they kind of have to some extent. Otherwise, I think it's kind of hard to tie all the storylines together because some of them are very separate. So um, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And he says things like, "Oh, older vampires can go in the sun" and all that. I don't recall that Armand was old enough for that to be the case.
Well, he says he's
Um,
also 500 years old. Also,
yeah,
I'm not sure that 500 would be enough. Um,
yeah, I think they have to be like really old, and it isn't that the sun necessarily doesn't hurt them. It kind of hurts them, but not like as
their
much.
skin is
So
like thicker or something at that point. Yeah.
yeah, and they still get a little burned, but it's not necessarily injury proof. But I guess in this particular series, they're kind of taking a different tack. But Armand is, he, like, Louis describes him as the love of his life, and that is definitely true for some time in the books. But I guess we'll see more of this backstory in the next season, which is exciting. So I don't know. What did you think about it? Did you think, like, I just was like, I don't know where they're going with this. I actually
Yeah,
thought it might be Marius, which they were going to bring. I was like, what? That would be really crazy because of the sun thing. Because Marius was able to go in the sun because he was so ancient.
because he's
But
like 2,000 years old.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't have a lot wrapped up in what I think Armand should be since he was played in the Brad Pitt movie by who's that Spanish actor?
Antonio Banderas.
Antonio Banderas. Like, and he's supposed to be a teenage boy, is like
Yeah,
his look. which is also kind of funny when they're like, "Oh, Claudia was too young to be made a vampire, you rascals," and they've aged him up for that film. So yes, between the books and that film and this show, obviously Armand is all over the place, right?
Yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
uh, so
But I like
I
this
don't have a
actor.
lot. Yeah, I mean he's been doing great, and I
Yeah,
think we both agreed that like they made Rashid into the secretary and then transitioned over the course of the season to make him a very curious character, and finally, oh, he's freaking Armand. Like that's a huge
yeah,
deal. He's also handing Malloy books full of flyers to the Theater of Vampires, which was the coven's name in Paris, right, in the
yep,
catacombs.
yep.
Um, so
And it was his coven. I mean,
yeah,
he did it.
like so we're gonna find out what happens to Louis and Claudia in Paris. It's the next chapter of this story, next season, and I'm very excited to find out what it is. Um, and so I'm fine with Rashid Armand being who they are. I guess I would rather he wasn't able to stand in the sunlight. I think
Yeah, that was the
that
only part. I think, I'm totally on board with all the changes that they've made in terms of the series and things like that. And I think that this actor does a great job in general of I don't of faking his insignificance, I guess, to the audience, and this slow reveal was very cool. So I really enjoyed that. And I'm just curious to see where they go with the backstory in Paris and how all this plays out. There is, at least in the books, a lot of like Armand, and I'm sure that they're gonna probably deal with some of this in the next season. But Armand has a lot of control over Louis, but some of the control he has is by lies of omission. And so at this point, they've been together a pretty long time, and so, as we've seen with like the flashbacks and with Daniel Malloy. So
I mean
I'm curious to
only
see.
50 years at most,
But
maybe
still,
longer.
I mean, if we're talking about, so it's just I'm curious to see where we end up with this and where they take this story. So, um,
The lines by Rashid about you're witnessing a suicide.
mhm.
I don't remember what episode that was even in, but I thought that those were interesting and more interesting coming from Armand. Like he clearly thinks that this interview is a bad idea.
Well, and apparently the last one too, but then it's like, well, then why wouldn't he let Louis kill Daniel? I guess that's the
Yeah.
question because he says, "Oh, I saved you once. I'm not going to save you again."
But the act of publishing this interview and Lestat's subsequent biography, these actually like in the vampire, I don't want to call it a society, but among their kind,
Is
these
a big
acts,
no-no.
well, they're not only big no-nos, but they really change everything
Mm-hmm.
like going forward.
Right.
So I think it is worth, if Armand is aware of it, nothing's been published yet. It's 2022.
Right.
Of course, he'll be like, no, this is
Yep.
a bad idea. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like it's fantastic season of a show. I'm looking forward to World War II Europe with vampires. What? Like that's
Yeah,
going to
yeah, yeah.
be really interesting. And so I can't speak highly enough about it. I hope more people watch it because based on the numbers, I mean Wikipedia doesn't, I don't know how they get numbers for streaming shows. Uh but I've watched these exclusively on Amazon Prime,
Me
and I
too.
don't think those numbers get published through Nielsen or places like that. I'm not sure. So hopefully they are getting the numbers that they need to continue.
Keep going because I think they have a lot of ground to cover.
You sure do.
But they also are, I mean, they're combining a lot of the stories, so maybe we'll get a lot further in the next season. So we'll have to see about that.
I
But
think
anyway,
what one of
I
the
enjoyed
things that helped with this season was there was a lot of continuity in terms of the hand on the tiller,
it.
if you
Hmm.
will. Um, there are a lot of different names who are under writer, and there were a few different directors, but honestly, like only 5 or 6 different directors. No, maybe even fewer, 4. But it felt like there was a consistency, right, in the
True.
storytelling for the most part.
But I think that's what you can do if it's a season like this, and hopefully they'll decide to do the same in terms of continuity with the next season. and agree. I think they knew exactly where they were going, and they made very specific decisions in terms of how to basically modernize this whole story. And I think they did it in a really good way. And the changes were there. I do think just in, I don't really have a gripe about anything I saw in this season other than I think changing a little bit of the mythology. Like I'm not sure where they're going with it or why. I guess with the Armand piece and him being able to be in the sun, they did that so that the audience was a little bit fooled about who he might be or what he might be. But overall, I really think that they did an incredible job with this, and I liked the changing of the timeline and all of that fun stuff. And I think it will make for a more interesting second season. Because so much of the story, just even in terms of the coven in Paris and things like that, a lot of it depends upon the fact that Louis and Claudia don't know anything and have never really encountered um
Mm-hmm.
other vampires like them. And in this case, they've already sort of revealed that there's other people out there. Um so I'm curious to see where they go with the story, but hopefully they do the same beautiful job that they did with the first season.
I agree. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah. So, what do you want to talk about next time?
Well, we have a little bit of a gap here before Last of Us will be available to review. So, well, I think we will go visit some films that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. We might also try to catch an episode of The Mayfair Witches. We'll see what happens.
Hmm. That
But
one, that one, I think we need to reserve judgment until we see an
yeah,
episode.
we need to watch it a little bit. I mean, that's kind of how I approached the interview. I watched an
Yeah,
episode.
same.
I told you how good I thought it was.
Yep.
And here we are. We've talked about it and loved the whole thing. So yeah.
Right. Right.
Um, and maybe, maybe the Mayfair Witches will be the same. I don't know. I remember really loving that first book though. So,
The first book was okay, but a lot, I don't know. It's just it's like over the top gothic themes, which, it's fine, but we'll have to I worry, but maybe the series will be as great as the Interview with the Vampire season. So
yeah.
anyway, but we'll have to
But
see.
instead, what we're gonna do next week is go to 2011 and talk about Juan of the Dead, a
Yes.
Cuban zombie film with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek name.
Yeah, and we've talked about reviewing this one for a while and we have not. So I guess it is time to do that. So
Indeed.
we will be chatting about that next time, and hopefully there will be more news out as well.
Oh yeah,
So
the dump of streaming news will just come, and so we'll talk about it all next time in early January 2023. Again, Happy New Year. If you want to have a listen to any of our previous episodes, those are all online at reanimated.podbean.com. And of course, you can let us know your thoughts about this season of Interview with the Vampire, vampires in general, and Rice in general, Mayfair Witches, whether you think that that's a good show or was a good book. At reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. We'd look forward to hearing from you.
indeed, and until next time, ciao.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.